Om Tat Sat Vedantartha Tadabhasa Kshira Neera Vivekinam Namami Bhagavatpādam Parahamsa Dhurandharam Dhvaninati Gabhirena Kavya Tattva Niveshina Ānandavardhana Kasya Nasid Ānandavardhana. With these benedictory verses, I shall be presenting my brief deliberations on a longer paper of mine. I'll be just bringing out the quintessence of my writing, as the time may not permit for the complete details. However, the full paper will be available, and by that people can utilize for further reading and enrichment. And at the outset, I am extremely beholden to Srimati Sri Swamiji and also the Ārsha Vidyā Gurukula organization for this opportunity. Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana, a comparative study. This is my topic. Of course, we all know how great is the role of Śaṅkara in contouring not only Indian philosophy but also the philosophy in general and in its totality. And Ānandavardhana is a very great name likewise. His contribution is very seminal, and his contribution too is comparable to that of Śaṅkara, for it decided the crux of not only Indian aesthetics but also of the world's. And we all know from India we have 4 great subjects where original thinking of the highest order has been done. And the interesting feature is, even today these contributions are very important and they have stood the test of time. Vyakarana, that is grammar and philosophy of grammar; Ayurveda, one of the studies of medicines of the world; and Rasatattva, that is the crux of aesthetics, art experience; and Sahitya Mimamsa, literary criticism and art criticism are aesthetics in general; and Brahma Tattva, or the universal spirituality, whatever can be called as philosophy. Brahma Tattva or Brahma Mimamsa, that is Vedanta, as per the exposition of Shankar Bhagavatpāda. These are the 4 major subjects in which India has done an impeccable contribution. And among them, I am taking Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana, representing Brahma Mimamsa and Rasa Mimamsa through the prakriya, the process of vivarta-vāda and vyañjanā-vyāpāra. We all know Indian philosophy, especially that of Vedanta, has been divided into 2 parts, pre-Śaṅkara and post-Śaṅkara. So also Indian aesthetics has been divided into pre-Ānandavardhana and post-Ānandavardhana. This itself shows how important are the contributions of these great luminaries. They are original, both of them are highly original in their approach, and they adhere to tradition. At the same time, they extend the tradition, they reinterpret the tradition, and the tradition is made more meaningful because of them. In that sense, they are rooted in anubhava, universal experience, and that is their unique quality, and that is their capability. And because of that, because of the holistic rootedness in experience of the highest order, both of them could come with brilliant ideas and brilliant concepts to reveal the fullest aspect of truth, that is Brahma Tattva, and the fullest aspect of beauty, that is of Rasa Tattva. We all know Vedantins, even before Śaṅkara and even after Śaṅkara, irrespective of their schools, they accepted in the ultimate concept of Brahma. Brahma Tattva is completely accepted by one and all, but they differed in its relationship with the world and the individual, the jagat and the jīva. What are the bearings and how they have to be treated, there they had differences. And also the relationship between these 3, jagat, jīva and Ishvara, as we call Tattvatraya. So also in the case of Indian aesthetics, all aestheticians irrespective of their schools, whether they belong to Alankara or Riti or Marga or Guna or whatsoever, all of them agreed with one concept, that is rasa. But they differed in the treatment and how rasa is related to other concepts and how these concepts contribute for the enrichment of poetry and their relative merits and demerits. All these things they approached in different ways. And before Śaṅkara, we see only in the works of Gaudapada, in the work of Gaudapada, a crystallization of vivarta-vāda, a crystallization of the Vedantic approach, the modus operandi, that is the adhyaropapavada viveka. As Śaṅkara often quotes in his Bhashya, tara sampradaya vidha ahuhu adhyaropapavadabhyam nishprapancham prapanchate, like that. But Śaṅkara established it fully because earlier to him, who all wrote the Bhashyams, none of them are seen now. Whether it is Ācārya or Brahmanandi or Ācārya or even Sundara Pandya or whosoever, none of their works are available. Only in fragmentary references we come across. And even some opposed schools, those of Bhartra Prapancha and others, we don't have any references apart from the major references which are given in the works of Śaṅkara and others. So the citations are available, but the works are not available. And hence we can't say anything decisive in this direction, but this much is sure. Śaṅkara is highly original and much goes to his credit. Of course, he had a great guru, Govinda Bhagavatpāda, and a great Paramaguru, Gaudapada Ācārya. In spite of that, it is Śaṅkara who wrote astounding works on the Prasthanatraya, astounding bhashyas on the Prasthanatraya. And because of these works, the vivarta-vāda, the approach of Śaṅkara, and the prakriya, adhyaropapavada prakriya, that got rooted and that explained all the features of Brahma, Jagat, Jīva, and the internal relationship between them, all these things. So Śaṅkara becomes ananya, indispensable and very unique in this regard. The same thing holds good to Ānandavardhana also. Before Ānandavardhana, we have a great illustrious traditions like Bharata, the great sage, whose Natya Shastra for the first time treatises the concepts of rasa, bhava and others. And in the chapter of lakṣaṇā, we have other features connected with poetry as well. And then we have Dandi, Bhāmaha. And before Bhāmaha mentions one person by name Medhavi Rudra and others. So in all these things, nowhere we come across vyañjanā-vyāpāra. Not even remotely this concept is delineated. But the germs of vivañjanā-vyāpāra are identified by scholars like A. Krishnamurti and others, but they are inferential in nature, but they are not direct. Only in the work of Ānandavardhana, that is Dhvanyaloka, we come across the importance of vivañjanā-vyāpāra. He himself says, Kavyasyatma dhvaniriti budair yas samamnata purvaha. It was there, but that was for the first time revealed completely. Here we should take an analogy. As per the Sangita Shastra, we have all the ragas, all the Janaka ragas, all the Janya ragas, all the Sampurna ragas, Asampurna ragas, Audava, Shadava, Shadava Sampurna, Audava Sampurna, like that. But a raga is established only when a full-fledged composition is done delineating all the features of that raga. If not, everything is already there. Just by writing a dictionary, all the works have been written. Because all works of literature or science or whatsoever will be written by using these words. And in that sense, a dictionary is completion of all the works. But it is not reality. Likewise, the works of Śaṅkara, the works of Ānandavardhana, they become seminal and they become impeccable, they become very important because before them, nobody revealed, at least to our knowledge, nobody have revealed these things in their fullest extent beyond doubt. And that's why Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana, they hold a very high place and they deserve our respects and gratitude also. Then we have the concept of vivarta-vāda and vivañjanā-vyāpāra or viyañjanā-vāda. Before Śaṅkara, people were there. They propounded parināma-vāda. And in the case of Saṅkhyans also, we see the same parināma-vāda. And in the Naiyayikas and even in the Vaisheshikas, we see the Ārambha-vāda. But only in Śaṅkara we see vivarta-vāda, Brahma vivarta-vāda. The world is appearance of the Brahman. At the substratum we have the Brahman. This is the simple explanation of vivarta-vāda. Like the waves whirl, droplets flow, everything is nothing but water. Ambho yatha salilam evahi tat samastam. Avarta budpada tarangamayan vikaran ambho yatha salilam evahi tat samastam, as Bhagavata says in Uttaramacharita. The complete system of water, at the basis we have water itself. All these are appearances, whether it is a bubble or a wave or wavelet or whatsoever. Likewise, Brahma is the ultimate reality, and jagat and jīva, they are nothing but appearances of the Brahman. This is the sum of vivarta-vāda, quintessence of vivarta-vāda. And in vyañjanā-vyāpāra, vyañjana is the highest suggestion. That is the suggestion which qualifies, which enlives all the explanation and all the abhidhā-vyāpāra. It means abhidhā-vyāpāra are the explicit expression. Expression will be qualified, expression will become fructified only because of vyañjanā-vyāpāra, that is impression. And hence, more than the lakṣaṇā and vyañjana abhidhā, it is vyañjana that is the crux of the language. In that sense, it is much closer to experience than any other thing. As we know, Brahman is the highest thing to be realized, and that is the basis of all our expression and experience. Likewise, vyañjanā-vyāpāra becomes the bedrock of our expression, and that becomes the key to our experience. In that way, Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana have parallels. And this, of course, is rooted in anubhava or purna anubhava. While we speak of anubhava, one should not be mistaken for the qualified experiences which are temporal in nature, which differ from place to place, time to time, person to person, situation to situation. But what we speak of anubhava in Vedanta is beyond all that. To bring in the words of Swami Sachidanandendra Saraswati and his Guru K. Krishna Swami Iyer, it is this sarvatrika anubhava, nirvishesha anubhava, as we call, that is very important, universal, and that can only be realized through the examination of the three states, jagrat, sushupti and swapna, jagrat, swapna, sushupti, avasthatraya. Unless we undergo a fullest mimamsa of this avasthatraya, fullest study of avasthatraya, we cannot understand what is meant by nirvishesha sarvatrika anubhava. Likewise, vyañjanā-vyāpāra can only be realized when we understand the complete expression. When we say just by the demise of a national leader, the whole country wept, this cannot be properly justified by explicit statement, that is abhidhā, not even by implied one, lakṣaṇā. It is only by the suggestion the fullest meaning of this simple statement can be extracted, so that this experiential understanding of that, it is the rootedness of rasa. So, any expression that is rooted in rasa, that is experience, will become more closer to reality, more closer to beauty. Reality is Brahman in Vedanta, and reality in aesthetics is rasa, that is beauty. So, in Vedanta, truth itself becomes beauty. In aesthetics, beauty itself becomes truth. But these two are not opposed to each other. As we know, Brahman is in its swarupa lakṣaṇā Satchidananda. So, sadeva chit chideva ananda. When the highest existence itself becomes highest ananda or joy, we have no contradictions. Looking at from this perspective, Ānandavardhana becomes much closer to Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda. And then, for this understanding, one should transcend triputi, subject-object difference, observer, observed and observation. All these 3 points should converge and that should become one. Likewise, here also, the expression and experience should become one. And that will happen in Rasa Siddhanta, as per Dhvanyaloka, as per Dhvani Tattva. That's why this triputi, Kavya, Kavi and Sahridaya, they become one. They become one in that experience. What experience the poet had, the same experience will be felt by the connoisseur as well. That's why Bhattatauta, the mentor of Abhinavagupta, says, Nayakasya kaveshrotuhu samano anubhava smritaha. Now coming to our discussion, in the Vedanta we have the three entities, Jagat, Jīva and Ishvara. All are vivarta of the Brahman. So also we have abhidhā, lakṣaṇā and vyañjanā. All are the vivarta of one same shabda. Anadi nidhanam brahma shabda tattvam yadaksharam vivartatertha bhavena prakriya jagato yataha. Thus spake Bhartrhari in his Vakyapadiya. Likewise we have the Shabda vivarta-vāda, Shabda Brahma vivarta-vāda, and then Brahma vivarta-vāda, they are finding their parallels. And by having this as the key, all locks connected with Jagat, Jīva, Ishvara, Bandha, Moksha can be opened. It's only by understanding the nature of Upadhi, that is the superimposition, and how to negate that. By negating that superimposition, the ultimate truth is realized. This is how we have the Vedantic Prakriya, Adhyaropapavada Viveka. By that, all the five features can be explained. We all know any system of philosophy, to be qualified so, should answer these five tattvas, should discuss them. Whether it agrees with or not is a different thing, but it should face and try to analyze them and give its verdict. Jagat, Jīva, Ishvara, Bandha and Moksha, Pancha Tattvas. So also in aesthetics, structure, substance, Rupa and Swarupa. In aesthetics, Rupa means Shabda and Swarupa means Artha. Both have to be analyzed, and at the level of structure we have certain features like Shabda Gunas, and at the level of substance we have Artha Gunas, and then both are connected with Marga, Riti, Shabdalankara, Arthalankara, figures of sense, figures of sound, like that we have. All these have to be answered properly. That can be done only by the help of vyañjanā-vyāpāra as propounded by Ānandavardhana. And then we have two parallels. One is of Karya Karana and other is of Vibhava and Anubhava. We all know the world and the worldly things are answered by the sequence of Karya and Karana. The whole of world, the whole of the mundane world, which is comprehensible through our senses, has to be answered, has to be analyzed from the stream of Karya Karana Bhava. Causation, cause and effect. But this concept itself becomes nullified, it becomes irrelevant when we realize the very nature of space and time is fictitious. Karya Karana Bhava, or the theory of causation, is rooted in spatio-temporal frames. But when space and time themselves becomes absurd, when they become absurd by the perspective of Avasthatraya Mimamsa, how to rely upon them? So they can be helpful, they can be useful only when we look from pramanas. From the perspective of pramatra, how to understand pramatra? Pramatuhu na kinchid anyat pramanam vidyate. When that being the case, the whole of Karya Karana Bhava becomes irrelevant. Likewise, in the case of art also, the sequence of Karya Karana Bhava, which is end oriented, which is highly materialistic and utilitarian, cannot come to our help, because art is not interested in results. It is interested in process, it is interested in experience, not in product. To draw a line from Bhagavad Gita, he says, Krishna, Sri Krishna, Kripanah phalahetavah. Men are the people who look after the results. But here it is not so. And to show that this is not materialistic in nature, it is supra-materialistic or it is transcendental, Abhinavagupta, while commenting upon the Rasa Sutra, he says, to show the alaukikatva of rasa, we use the terms vibhava and anubhava instead of karana and karya. So the mundane sequence of karana and karya are will derail us, and that's why they are kept aside, and the ethereal nature of them, that is vibhava and anubhava, that is taken into account, and that's why Bharata, he has coined these things. Tatra vibhava anubhava vyabhichari sanyoga rasanishpati, like that it goes. And then how deshakala baddhata, the bias of deshakala come in the way of understanding Brahman. So also deshakala visheshavesha, one among the 7 rasa doshas, will come in the way of enjoying rasa Brahma. So Kevala Brahma, to realize that desha and kalas should be restricted and they should be transcended. They are mundane in nature. They cannot be of any help to us. So transcending Deshakala is the only way to realize Parabrahman. Likewise, Rasa Brahma or the Rasa can only be realized when we transcend the impediment of Deshakala Vishesha Avesha, being carried away by Desha and Kala. That is materialistic in nature. And then Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda for the first time perhaps gives 2 concepts, very, very illuminating concepts. One is Vastu Tantra and other is Purusha Tantra. Vastu Tantra is about universal truth and Purusha Tantra is about the temporal truth. Likewise, we have Brahma and Rasa. Brahma in Vedanta is Vastu Tantra. Rasa in aesthetics is Vastu Tantra. And all other things, they are Purusha Tantras in comparison with Brahma and Rasa. This will provide an insight into making a hierarchy about other concepts, because Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda, though a committed Vedantin of Advaita Tattva, he has not ignored the world, he has not ignored the implications of the world. The worldly things have to be set in proper priority. We have to prioritize. It is not ekata, it is advaita. It is not eka, it is advaita, means non-duality, not just oneness. Oneness is ignorance, but non-duality is awareness. And Ānandavardhana likewise, because of his rootedness in rasa through vyañjanā-vyāpāra, places the rest of the things in their proper hierarchy. And that's why he has Uttama Kavya, Madhyama Kavya and Adhama Kavya. Likewise, Śaṅkara has Paramarthika Satya, Vyavaharika Satya and Pratibhasika Satya. All are based on these 2 features, Vastu Tantra and Purusha Tantra. And that's why people who generally make one baseless allegation on Śaṅkara that he was not a social reformer, he denounced the world, he rejected the world, and he rejected even the existence of the world. This Jagan-mithyatva of Śaṅkara as propounded in his works, they suggest negation, negating the existence, negating world and other things, and that's why he is not bothered about the social implications, and he was not connected with the rituals, he was not even connected with the explaining our treatises like Purana, Itihasa, Karmakanda and other things like so many such allegations, but they find no water for the simplest reason. Śaṅkara's main work was focused on Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, as in the words of Vedanta Dindima. So when once this is settled, the rest will find their places proper by themselves. Etena sarve vyakhyatavya vyakhyataha, like that it will happen. And that's why Śaṅkara never had to take a tiresome course. And that's why the followers of Śaṅkara, the later Vedantins, they did all these things. For example, if Karmakandas are not properly taken care of by Śaṅkara, he says Vyavahare Bhattanaya, and the same thing has been done in the great works of Ācārya and others. In Ācārya's Vedartha Prakasha, we do find so much of importance being given to Karmakanda in the light of Jnanakanda. And again, further, Ācārya is unwantedly blamed that he has given only ritualistic interpretation of the Veda. It's all nonsense, to say the least. No one can allegate Ācārya for this reason, because if you look into his expositions on hymns like Nasadaya Sukta, Asyavamiya Sukta, Vishwakarma Sukta and others, you will be knowing how deeply Vedantic and how deeply Jnana Paramya it is. Because of that, the followers of Śaṅkara properly they restored all these things, and Swami Vidyāranya, he clearly says, Jnānena charitum shakyam samyak rajyade lokikam, means he was not even left politics, not even left vivahara and other things. In the words of Vivekananda, we know only Vedantin can be a better human being. A person with Vedanta will become a better human being in all respects of life, in all walks of life. A football player who knows Vedanta will be a better football player, like that. He continues. So, it is this work of Śaṅkara that enlightened the rest, and they took it as an inspiration, they took it as the model, and then they worked on that, and they arrived at very tantalizing results. Likewise, Ānandavardhana cannot be objected, no allegations can be laid against him that he never defined kavya, he never showed the place of guna, alankara with examples, and he never classified them properly, codified them, give a lakṣaṇā, all these things, and also various types of kavyas, khanda kavya, mahakavya and others. This is a very, very untenable objection, because by the work of Ānandavardhana, the rest of the people, the followers, Mammata or Vishwanatha or Jagannatha or even Hemachandra and many, many people, they have done all these things. It is a very easier thing. That is why Abhinavagupta says, Purva Pratisthapita Yojanasu Bola Pratishtha Phala Vamananti. In Abhinav Bharati says, because of that, we will be clearly knowing that this Vastutantra and Purushatantra concepts of Śaṅkara, that gave way for ratification, enumeration, correction, codification, clarification of all these things without disturbing the bedrock of Śaṅkara. Now coming to Pratyaksha, Paroksha and Aparoksha, all the worldly things which are bound by Triputi, subject-object difference, they are perceivable through our senses. And what is beyond our senses, in the mundane level, it is paroksha. So, much of the mundane things, materialistic things, they are pratyaksha. And all our belief systems, they become paroksha. But Vedanta has no problem with these things. Only these two things have problem with Vedanta. Vedanta says it is aparoksha. It is beyond these things. Vedanta is not opposed to Shraddha. Vedanta is not even opposed to our mundane experiences. Vedanta is neither opposed to religion nor to science. But these two things, they are opposing Vedanta. Vedanta makes these two things enlivable. These two things are made meaningful because of Vedanta, and this is because of the stand of aparoksha. Likewise, Gunibhuta Vyangya and Dhvani, these two concepts, they can be equated with Nirguna Brahma and Saguna Brahma. In the level of Nirguna Brahma, we have Dhvani, and in the level of Saguna Brahma, we have Gunibhuta Vyangya. Saguna Brahma is for our Upasana. That is Gauna Brahma or Ācārya Brahma or Apara Brahma, as we call. And Nirguna Brahma is the Mukhya Brahma or the Paramartha Brahman. And Dhvani is that. All other things which are illuminated by the touchstone of Dhvani are to be termed as Gunibhuta Vyangyas. Any attractive phrase, any attractive spell, any attractive movement, any attractive stroke of the brush, it is all Gunibhuta Vyangya, and that is directing towards Dhvani. There is Dhvani, but Dhvani is becoming, that is, suggestion is becoming subordinated to expression. That is the definition of Gunibhuta Vyangya. Likewise, form and quality, they are dominating the formless and the thing which is beyond quality. So, in Saguna Brahma, the name, Nama and Rupa, the form, they are dominating. But in the substratum, we have the Brahman itself. As in the Lalita Sahasrama, we have Mithya, Jagat, Adhisthana, Muktida, Mukti Rupini, Lalita, Tripura Sundari is Saguna. It is Sarupa. But Adhisthana is Chidananda Ghana. Likewise, we have these two concepts, and because of that, we clearly know that Dhvani and Gunibhuta Vyangya, they become very handy tools. Dhvani, of course, is always there. It is primordial. Gunibhuta Vyangya will become a very, very handy tool in explaining all minor or all tenable features of beauty. So also, Saguna Brahma becomes very, very useful tool to cultivate Shraddha, to cultivate activity. the karma kanda is completely relying upon saguna Brahma. So also the bhakti, as we call the Ghataka Shruti, and also we call that as the Sankarshana Kanda and the Upasana Kanda. All these things that is connected with bhakti, they are all coming under the realm of Saguna Brahma. And Saguna Brahma, which is completely catering to the larger masses, will certainly end up in Nirguna Brahma. That's why it is said, Udara Sarvaye Vaite by Bhagavad Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita. And then we have yet another concept called Adhyaropapavada Prakriya. We all know Adhyaropapavada Abhyam Nishprapancham Prapanchite, it is said by Śaṅkara, quoted by Śaṅkara in his Bhashyas. This Adhyaropapavada Prakriya itself is the key to understand alankaras as well. For example, face is comparable to the orb of the moon. Mukham Chandra Bimbam Iva Drishyate, like that. The example, what it means, the moon's beauty is superimposed on face. Mukham is the substratum. On that superimposition is of moon's orb. Mukham Chandra Bimbam Iva, face resembles moon's orb. So moon is superimposed. But we don't equate that face is moon. It's a mistake. It's Bhranti Jnana. It's Mithya Jnana. But we don't even think that it is ridiculous to compare face with moon. We neither dismiss nor accept without digesting. We accept in a partial manner. How? All the other attributes of moon are kept aside. Moon is circular and wanes, waxes, and moon will not be seen on new moon day night. All these things will not be taken into account. Only the brilliance of moon's orb, only the pleasant feeling we get when we look at the moon's orb, that is all taken into account. So Alhada Janakatva is the only thing that is taken. This is called Jahal Lakṣaṇā. And by this Jahal Lakṣaṇā itself, Tattvamasi is properly justified. In that way, to understand Tattvamasi, we need Jahal Lakṣaṇā. Likewise, we have to understand Alankara. The basis of all Alankaras, of course, is comparing and contradicting. Upamayika Shailusha, like that Appai Dikshita says, Upama, the fundamental, the most fundamental Alankara. So, Vinotkarshapakashabhyam Swadantyarthana Jatu Chit Tadarthameva Kavayo Alankaran Pariyupasate. Our Mahima Bhatta says in his Vyakti Viveka. It means comparing and contradicting, pulling up or pulling down. This is happening in Alankara, and this is again Adhyaropapavada Viveka. Like that, we have the similarity of Ānandavardhana and Śaṅkara from their Prakriya perspective also. Both emphasize Anubhava, and in the Anubhava, Śaṅkara's emphasis is on Jivan Mukta Anubhava, and of course Ānandavardhana's is on Sahridaya Anubhava. Here, the seminal contribution of Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana should be understood. Before that, Brahmavada many times becomes the cup of tea of a logician. But Śaṅkara again and again says, it is not the Tarkika who decides the reality. It is only Anubhava. That is what it is said, Na kevalam dharma jignasayam shrutyadeh pramanam, like that in the beginning of the Brahma Sutra Bhashya itself it is said. So I am not going to the quotations in detail. Likewise, Ānandavardhana too, instead of Mīmamsakas, Nayayikas and grammarians taking the hold, establishing their fold or claiming fold on Kavya Shastra, Ānandavardhana says, Atra adhikari pratibhanavan, nirmala pratibhanavan sahridaya. Abhinavagupta also explains that Tena brūmaha sahridayamana pritaye tatsvarupam, sahridayamana pritaye. Sahridaya, connoisseur is very important, and connoisseur is Anubhava. It is said clearly that in Karma Kanda and other things, Shastra may become Pramana. Here it is Anubhava, and the validation of Anubhava will happen with Shastra, and Shastra will be validated in turn by the Anubhava of the Jnanis, like that. And then in Brahmananda and Rasananda, we have some differences. Both of them agree to it. In Brahmananda, avidya is once for all removed. And that's why Anavrati Shabda, the last sutra of Brahma Sutra, no repetition, no birth and death cycle, no more. No such things will happen when once it is realized. It is once for all. But in the case of Rasananda, it is not so. As Mammata's explanation goes on, avidya, kama and karma, this is the chain. Avidya is the root cause of kama and kama is the root cause of karma, activity. But in the case of Vedanta, the very seed of avidya itself is burnt. And that's why no more recycling, no more confusion with the world. But in the case of Rasananda, as the trigger is external, the nimitta is bahya, kama and karma, they are suspended as long as we are enjoying rasa. When once the stimulus has stopped, the kama and karma again crop up because avidya is not yet removed completely. When once avidya is eradicated, the world by itself will be seen as poetry, itself will be seen as a painting, itself will be heard as music. So the jagat itself becomes kavya, devasya pasya kavyam na mamara na jiryati, as the Shruti says. Śaṅkara is suggesting this world as poetry. And Ānandavardhana is saying how to appreciate poetry. In that sense, Ānandavardhana's system becomes a beautiful sadhanopaya for the understanding of Vedanta. In that sense, Kala Yoga is one of the finest yogas to equip ourselves for Brahmasiddhi. Chittasya shuddhaye karma natu vastupalabdhaye. It is well said, we know. Like that, moksha sadhana samagriyam bhaktireva gariyasi in Vivek Chudamani. But in moksha sadhana samagri, Kala Yoga, art experience becomes a very important one. Here I should draw your attention to Professor M. Hirina's writings. Professor M. Hirina says art becomes layman's yoga, bypassing logic for ultimate realization. And he goes to the extent of saying that in the modern era of science and reasoning, equality and democracy, more than religion, art will come as a better tool to realize highest truth, to equip ourselves for that. In that sense, art can replace in a better way religion, because we know so many things have been done because of so many havocs have been done because of fanaticism in religion. But art will certainly temper human beings, and because of these things, art as a yoga will come to our help. And then Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana, though they are meritorious scholars of the highest order, they had considerations for other things also. Śaṅkara's system of philosophy, in its crux, has no place for atindriya siddhis. In one of his bhashyas, he says, it may be there, I may not challenge its existence, but it is not needed and I don't know about that. He clearly says that. He says that in his bhashya, let me quote it verbatim. Yogopyanimadyaishvarya praptis phalakaha smaryamano nashakyate sāsamatrena prakhyatum rishīnāmapi mantra brahmana darshinām samarthyam nasmadiyena samarthyena upamatum yuktam. In Shareka Bhashya. But Yogi Pratyaksha has no validation in Vedanta. It is only Sarvatrika Nirvishesha Samanya Pratyaksha, Samanya Anubhava. That is very important. Yogi Pratyaksha has no role in Vedanta, Śaṅkara Vedanta. Because if we adhere to Yogi Pratyaksha, all problems of revelations in religions, whether it is Islam or Christianity or Shaiva or Vaishnava, I had a revelation, so you have to believe me. This blind following will become cancerous. To avoid that, Śaṅkara has clearly said so, and that is truth as well. Likewise, Ānandavardhana challenges Chitra Kavita. Chitra Kavita, it is efforted poetry or extreme poetry or figurative poetry, has no rasa. If at all it has any, it is very, very meager to gauna. Hence, they shun that. But at the same time, they themselves were great yogis. Shankar Bhagavatpāda was a great yogi. Ānandavardhana was a great champion of Chitrakavya. He wrote Devi Shataka, means having practiced that, having attained that, they are knowing their limitations and they are showing their respective places. And then they have certain limitations, both Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana, but the limitations are not eclipsing their contributions, their major contributions. Modern times we know that Śaṅkara had no great accommodation for all varnas, because he says a sannyasi can only come from the Brahmana Kula and only a man can become sannyasi, like that. But this has not come in the way of his highest truth, exposition of highest truth, because he himself in the Apashuddradhikarana says, irrespective of the caste, creed and other things, everyone is entitled for moksha. And in the Taittiriya Bhashya also, he clearly shows that. I shall read out that very important passage. It says, Sarveshanchadhikaro vidyayam yesha punaha sanskaravashat vidura dharmavyada prabhutinam jnanotpattistesham na shakyate phalaprapti pratishedhum jnanasya ekantika phalatvat shravye chaturo varnan iti cha itihasa purana adhigame chaturvarnyasya adhikara smaranat. And also he says, just by birth, a Brahmin will not be entitled to have moksha. Ayantvevam bhuta etasyam avasthayam mukhyo brahmana pragetasmat brahmaswarupa avasthanat gaudamasya brahmanyam, in Brihadaranyaka Bhashya. It means Śaṅkara had no special affinity for these things, but he was product of his society and what was happening in the society as per he wrote it. But in spite of that, his canon, his system of philosophy is never eclipsed by such limitations, because they are external, they are too peripheral in nature. And then Śaṅkara's parampara has given bigger accommodation also. It is because of the philosophical light of Śaṅkara, philosophical enlightenment, philosophical enrichment of Śaṅkara. For example, Śaṅkara's direct disciple Sureshwara in his Bhashyavartika, Brihadaranyaka Bhashyavartika says, even Kshatriyas are entitled to have sannyasa. But we should know sannyasa has two aspects, one Vividisha and other Vidvat sannyasa. Vividisha sannyasa, all these count, but Vidvat sannyasa has no lanchana, no linga, nothing counts. And in spite of that, Sureshwara says even linga sannyasa, that is Vividisha sannyasa, can be procured by Kshatriyas as well. And further enhancing that, in Jivan Mukti Viveka, Vidyaranya Swami says even women are entitled to have this lanchana sannyasa or linga sannyasa, that is Vividisha sannyasa, finally leading to Vidvat sannyasa. Vidvat sannyasa, for that nobody is there to offer, nobody is there to accept, and no lanchana is there to wear. It is only a state of mind. That is what Śaṅkara emphasizes more. And then later years, we have Swami Vivekananda and others, irrespective of the race, caste, creed, gender, anything, everyone is entitled to have that Brahmajnana. That is always there. And again, the spirit of Śaṅkara has been carried out. And that's why allegating Śaṅkara that he was anti-social reformation is very wrong. If so, it is very, very peripheral and partial. And we do know that everyone is product of his or her time. That's why these social implications, these socio-temporal, spatio-temporal implications can always be transcended and should be transcended, and the Śaṅkara parampara has transcended that. Similarly, Ānandavardhana, while dealing with Rasavadalankara, he necessarily digrades. Just because Dandiyan and others, his predecessors have delineated that feature, and Ānandavardhana too indulges, but it's a redundant concept. It can be very easily dismissed in the light of Ānandavardhana's work itself. And also, here and there, he tries to demean Arthalankaras as Keyura Kataka Devat. That is, figures of sense or figures of meaning as peripheral in nature, very peripheral embellishments, but it is not so. But in his own work, he has given us a beautiful way to realize that rasakshiptataya yatra bandhasya bandhashakya kriyo bhavet apratagyatna nirvartyah solankaro dhvano matah sharirakaranam yesham vachyatve vyavastitam telankara param chayam yanti dhvanyangatang gataha. In that way, anything which is having bearing in rasa, anything which is directly connected to rasa, such an embellishment is very important, and that is the real embellishment. Like the real Brahmana, what Śaṅkara intended, Mukhya Brahmana, as per Brihadaranyaka Bhashya, it has to be taken into consideration. And then both of them were great scholars, and yet their language, their expression is very lucid and very simple. Śaṅkara Bhashya, often known as Prasanna Gambhīra, even his great commentator Vachaspati Mishra, he says Prasanna Gambhīra. Likewise, Ānandavardhana's expression is also very lucid. They were great scholars. It is very rare to find great visionary, a great scholar, a great person rooted in fullest experience put together and then coming out with great works. Generally, we have mystics, we have people of high experience, people who are visionaries, but lacking in expression, lacking in logical acumen. And sometimes people who have highest logical acumen will not be having the real feel for the subject, real enlightenment. So it is very, very hard to find such a great golden combination as we see in Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana. That itself shows how important they are. And then they never made any discrimination with respect to different forms of gods, different deities, all, whether Shiva or Shakti or Vishnu or whatsoever, everything was treated alike. This can be extended to any form, any belief, no problem, as long as they are rooted in Brahma Tattva. The Upasana Daiva, Saguna Brahmas may change as per the likes and dislikes of the devotee. Yo yo yam yam tanum bhaktaha shraddhaya architam ichchati tasya tasya chalam shraddham tameva vidadamyaham. In the words of Bhagavad Gita, it is valid. Likewise, Ānandavardhana's aesthetics is valid not only to Sanskrit literature, not only to literature of any language, but also to other arts like theatrical arts, plastic arts, dance, music and such performing arts and anything and everything. And his Devata Taratamya is never made, has never taken, dominated Śaṅkara or Ānandavardhana. And also their Catholicity and accommodation. Though Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda was a committed Vedantin in the Advaitic tradition, he is not hesitant to accommodate Vishishtadvaita. One of his well-known hymns, Satyapi Bheda Apagame Natha Tavaham Namamakīnastvam Samudrohi Tarangaha Kochana Samudro Nacha Tarangaha. That is in the Shatpadi Stotra, 3rd verse. He says, the waves belong to ocean, but the ocean never belongs to waves completely. Whole and soul, belongingness of Samudra or ocean is not restricted to a wave or a wavelet. Likewise, I belong to Paramatman, but Paramatman is completely not belonging to me. In that way, we do see Shesha Sheshi Bhava, Vishishtadvaita, but Śaṅkara was not hesitant because Swasiddhanta Vyavastasu Dvaitino Nishchita Dradam Parasparam Virudhyante Tairam Na Virudhyate. This is what Gaudapada said. And a worthy Prashishya of Gaudapada, Śaṅkara treads the same path. And Ānandavardhana, he, in spite of becoming a great poet and a greater aesthetician and a greatest connoisseur, says, in front of true devotion, in front of that Bhagavat Charanagati, these are all of no significance. Ya vyaparavati rasan rasaitum kachit kavinam nava drishtirya parinishtitartha vishayon meshacha vipaschiti tedve apyavalambya vishwamanisham nirvarnayanto vayam shananta naivacha labdham abdhishayanatvad bhakti tulyam sukham. So, he has no hesitation in accepting that Bhagavad Bhakti is much more than all these things. This can only happen with a realized soul, with a person who has no biases, with a person who is not just adhering to his subject, one who can transcend the subject and look at it with a dispassionate mind can come with such great words. So, these two greatest luminaries from India, from the perspective of Brahma Tattva and Rasa Tattva, have really made our tradition proud and meaningful. Advaita Tattva Rasa Yajna Samindhanesau Mantradhvanir Jayati Śaṅkara Sanyamindraha Ānandavardhana Sudhirapi Samadhama Vyañgyartha Bhuta Paramadvaya Tattva Satre. With this verse of mine, I conclude. Thank you.
We'll have questions. So, very
Thank you.
Cerebral paper, and because we did not receive the paper, we have to apply the mind to understand the things and all those things. Unfoldment and clearer understanding will go on. Yeah, what is the time of Ānandavardhana? What is the time of Ānandavardhana? Is post Śaṅkara, right?
9th century.
No, we have
9th century common era.
9th century next very late. See, wiki. So, what he has done, the most difficult verse in Bhagavad Gita is Nāsata vidyata-bhava, nābhava vidyate satah, and Śaṅkara has explained. Ānandavardhana has explained it in his own way in Dhvanyaloka.
Yes, of course.
You would have seen that?
Yes.
And in our parampara, whether Ārsha Vidyā, Advaita parampara, people have not studied Sahitya, so they are not aware of it. That there is another interpretation of Nāsata vidyate bhava. So that if you could 820. No, that he makes it, the Śaṅkara is gone and 897 years. Okay, let me write it down.
Post Śaṅkara.
Certainly.
I want to, as 820 to 890, okay. That is one thing that you will explain maybe. Tonight we will go through other small things I want to have it clarified.
Regarding the date of Ānandavardhana,
has he quoted Śaṅkara anywhere?
No, not at all. But it is very, very clear that he was posterior to Śaṅkara. In the Kashmir, we have all the lineage of kings, and Ānandavardhana too gives such details. And before him, who were the writers, and after him, who were the writers, their dates were all known, and that's why it is very clear that Ānandavardhana belongs to mid of 9th century. Śaṅkara, of course, there are so many diverging views, but very great scholars like Kuppaswami Shastri, and then Baladev Upadhyaya, Govind Chandra Pandeya, and then Sachidanandendra Saraswati. Of course, we have people like Dr. V. Raghavan, and even scholars like Shrikanta Shastri, historians. They have come to conclusion, as per Kuppaswami Shastri, Shrikanta Shastri and others, it is the mid of 7th century common era, there Śaṅkara lived. So, Professor S.K. Ramchandra in his writings also he mentions that it is from 632 to 664. Between this period of 32 years, Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda lived in his mortal body. So, it is mid of 7th century.
So, Ānandavardhana has not quoted Śaṅkara anywhere, right? So my second thing is, where exactly in the Shruti, Satchit Ananda comes? Because I have been
as per my knowledge goes, in none of the Upanishads, this phrase occurs. But the spirit is there. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma, Raso Vai Saha. Like that it is said.
At what point Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma became Sat Chit Ananda? Whether we have evidence.
I haven't even seen in the Bhashyas of Śaṅkara Bhagavatpāda, this phrase Satchidananda is being used together. I don't see. When it got crystallized, we don't know. But one thing, the concept is one thing, the phraseology is another thing. We do know that the concept existed long ago, since the time of the Upanishads at least. And the phraseology, that is Satchidananda, it came later. Perhaps we see this phrase as from 10th century common era onwards frequently.
Tattvamasi is jagat lakṣaṇā, no?
Yes.
You said
Jahat. Jahat.
It is jahat lakṣaṇā both.
You denigrate part of it, you remove part of it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Bhagatyaga lakṣaṇā.
Can you please?
Ajahat means, considering all the upadhis, it is dangerous.
Okay. So, Jahat lakṣaṇā, ajat lakṣaṇā. To interpret Tattvamasi, it is Jahat lakṣaṇā.
Jagadajahal lakṣaṇā, but better to say Jahal lakṣaṇā because
Will be there now if you say that Jahat lakṣaṇā.
because
In the Vedanta
the
Sara, it
from the
is-
perspective of upadhi, it is Jahat. Unless you keep away the upadhi,
What is your, how are you interpreting, how are you categorizing interpretation of Tattvamasi, which of the three, which is taken?
to make it specific, we can say Jahadajahal lakṣaṇā or the Bhaga lakṣaṇā.
That is how Vedanta Sara.
Yes. That's how even the Tattvamasi Vakya in the Chandogya Upanishad Bhashya is also discussed. But it is Jahat, Jahati, that is taking away the Upadhi, that is much more important. If not, so Sa Atma Tattvamasi Shvetaketo Saha Atma and Tvam, where equanimity is there, where oneness is there, that is only in the Adhisthana. That is only in the Nirupadhitva. The Upadhis are Nama Rupas. So the Nama Rupik Upadhis have to be taken away. They should be discarded. Then only you will be having the Nirupadhika Tattva. So this is, the Jahat is very important.
No, so the third one only applies.
What?
Jahat, ajat lakṣaṇā.
Well, both can be, but it is,
Devadatta of that time, that space is removed.
yes,
And the Devadatta of this
Ah.
time and this space is removed.
yes.
The
Common
Adhisthana-
thing will be kept.
Adhisthana is,
So there we have Jahat.
I still don't agree.
Agreement and disagreement is different
Because,
thing.
Vedanta Sara says that it is.
I am depending on the Bhashyas.
In face like moon also, the difference between Upama and Rupaka, supposing Shakespeare says, the world is a stage. World is like a stage, becomes Upama, but the world is a stage becomes a metaphor.
Yes, of course. But
For-
even
which
the
is
metaphor also,
Which is our Rupaka.
yes, of course, metaphor or upama or whatsoever, in both the cases, the thing which is drawn in to explain, that has to be kept aside ultimately. Mukha Chandram or Mukham Chandra Bimbamiva, face is like moon's orb, it is upama, face moon, that is Rupaka. English will not permit such compounding, but Mukha Chandra, that is a metaphor, Tadrupya Rupaka Alankara. But there again, even in Rupaka also, the qualities of moon, the moonness in all its respect will not be taken into account. Only the Alhada Janakatva, the basic commonality, that is taken into account. The rest of the things will be kept aside.
Wait, I'll ask simple questions
Oh.
for my benefit. It's very complex, the Vedantins will not know They will not know the philosophy. Chitrakavya doesn't have rasa. So many Chitrakavya on the Twitter.
Yes, I myself have.
commit suicide.
No, I
make
myself have
like
been a practitioner of Chitrakavya. I have written, but to quote the words of Kavi Karnapura, it is said, just like chewing the sugar cane in its knots, it will have an element of sweetness. The rest of the sugar cane will be more juicy and sweeter, but at the knots, it will not be that tasty. Likewise, Chitrakavya, when it ponders over devotion, it will have an element of enjoyment. Ānandavardhana, though said it is, it need not be considered as kavya. Only two types of poetry as per him. It is Dhvani Kavya and Gunibhuta Kavya. Vyangya Kavya and Gunibhuta Vyangya Kavya. These are the two types of poetries. Chitra Kavya is no Kavya. And yet he says Shabda Chitra and Artha Chitra. Yes, he says. Yes, Ānandavardhana says. But his followers, including Mammata and Jagannatha, they give accommodation to that because, like I mentioned, the Śaṅkara's successors, people who came after Śaṅkara, they accommodate certain things in the light of Śaṅkara's Tattva. Likewise, an element of enjoyment will be there. For example, If we look at the Chitra Kavitas which are composed by people like Dr. Shankar Rajaraman, an esteemed friend of mine, many poets who may compose verses without that restriction of Chitratva, their verses are not that good when compared to Shankara's verses which are in the form of Chitrakavya. Certainly, there is an element of enjoyment that may not be very much. For example, in a small verse, however profound it may be, it cannot entertain us like Raghuvamsha or Meghaduta or Othello or Iliad or Ramayana or Mahabharata. But as a verse, as an isolated one verse, Muktaka, it will have its own appeal. For example, from Subhashitavali, edited by Peterson, Vallabhadeva's Subhashitavali, he is the compiler Vallabhadeva, there is a Dvyakshara. Tara tara tarai retaihi uttarottarato rutaihi ratarta tittiri rauti tire tire tarau tarau. No difficulty in understanding. A lamented bird who is yearning and moving in all directions, moving in every nook and corner on a bank of a river, searching for its beloved and screaming desperately, but alas, it is not getting any response. Tara tara tarai retaihi uttarottarato rutaihi, escalating scream, rata artha tittiri, a tittiri, a she bird, tittiri bird, rauti, crying, tire tire, in the banks, tarau tarau, in every tree, in every groove it's moving, but it's finding in desperation for its lover, it is not getting. This is beautiful poetry, though only two syllables, two sounds have been used, ta and ra. These are the two consonants that are being used. No difficulty in understanding that. That is possible. So, Chitrakavya, a work by name Sitaramana Samvada Jari, composed by a great scholar poet Chamarajanagar Ramashastri and his disciple Sitaram Shastri, both from Mysore of Karnataka, in early 20th and late 19th century. There hundreds verses are composed, century of verses. First three lines, they represent Ravana's boasting, ridiculing Rama or eulogizing one's own self. Then in the last line, Sita gives a pungent, tricky answer. By decoding that answer, all the three lines spoken by Ravana will be denigrating him or will be eulogizing Rama in turn. This is a very beautiful, enjoyable Chitra Kavita.
Playing with words.
Like that. This way, a Chitra Kavya can also be appealing, but not comparable to Dhvani Kavya. A great aesthetic theory is that it should unmistakably show which is the best Kavya and which is a good one and which is no good. But at the same time, it should be capable of accommodating all sorts of beautiful expression, however meager beauty there may exist. This is how Shankara Bhagavatpāda's Vedanta, it is catering to one and all. It is catering to Jivan Muktas like Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna Paramahansa. At the same time, it is catering to a very, very common human being who has no understanding of jagat, jīva and Ishvara, and yet he has a very simple, humble devotion to one God or the other, to one deity or the other, who may be... Anyone.
Work of Shankara.
Because Anavritti Shabdat is the last sutra of Brahma Sutra. There he shows even people who are not realization of the Brahman will also get salvation at the end of the Kalpa. Yes, and Shankara never opposes that. He gives the commentary in tune with Badrayanas. It means, Shankara says, and also, Tepe Yamte Mameva in Bhagavad Gita, he again says, Chaturvida Bhajante Mam. Artatva is also accommodated by Krishna. Jignasu, Artha, Arthi, Jnani. So, Adhikari Bheda is always there. Irrespective of Adhikari Bheda, all are given justice. But there is a ladder. But that doesn't mean they are not denied. Opportunity to restore themselves, opportunity to rescue, it is always there. But it will be gradual. Krama Mukti is there. We do have that Krama Mukti. Sadhyo Mukti and Krama Mukti is there. Jivan Mukti and Videha Mukti is there. Shankara is a champion of Jivan Mukti, and yet he will not ridicule other Krama Muktis and other things.
Because if the Mula Grantha is saying that, So naturally, being a Bhashyakara,
Yes.
he cannot contradict.
Fine. Very good.
So when Chaturvidha Vajatimam, Lord Krishna is telling, so naturally he has to
Yes.
validate that with.
But Śaṅkara, we do find places where Śaṅkara is coming away. For example, coming away means he is taken into account the complete spirit. Karmaneva samsiddhim astita janakadaiha, while commenting upon this Gita Vakya, or while giving out exposition on Ānandamayobhyāsāt, there he is challenging the Vrittikara. There Yatishwarananda says, here the Bhashyakara is saving the Sutrakara himself. And in the independent works of Śaṅkara, like Vivek Chudamani or Upadesh Sahasri,
Vrittikara is
Bodhayana or Upavarsha, Śaṅkara in his independent works like Upadesh Sahasri or Vivek Chudamani or Shatashloki, in such places also, his considerations are always there. He is a very compassionate person.
You know that we don't accept all these things as his work.
Yes, but Upadesh Sahasri can certainly be accepted.
It is challenging.
Yes.
The other thing I genuinely wanted to ask is, when you say that the catholicity of Śaṅkara and his being accommodative, Vishishtadvaita, from Śaṅkara till Ramanuja, so how he can accommodate three
here I have to clarify one thing. Though we have, I believe that works like Upadesh Sahasri and then Shatpadi Stotra, they are penned by Śaṅkara. There an element of Vishishtadvaita is there, but that is different from Vishishtadvaita of Ramanujacharya, because it is a sthiti, as we know from the words of Madhusudan Saraswati, Upasanartham yadvaitam kalpitam tad advaitadapi modharam, like that he says. For Upasana, having Dvaita is much more sweeter than Advaita. This is how it is Upadi Kalpita. It is something like we are watching drama knowing fully that the characters present there are not the real one. Character is different, person is different. The character of Rama is played, not that person. It is the character. Likewise, this Dvaitatva and Vishishtadvaita, all these things spoken by Śaṅkara, it is Upadibadhita. But Ramanujacharya or Madhvacharya and Vallabhanimbarka and others who are not after vivarta-vāda, they don't agree with this. They say that is absolute reality. Satyapi bheda pagame natha tavaham na mama kenastvam is sapeksha satya, not paramartha satya.
Shatpadi Stotra is by Śaṅkara?
Yes, that's what I believe. Because we don't have sufficient evidences to challenge that it is not penned by Śaṅkara. When we see the real spark of Śaṅkara from the Pramana Mantakarana Pravrittishu, the words of Kalidasa have been echoed by our Mīmānsaka Agresara, Kumarila Bhatta, Satam hi sandeha padeshu vastushu pramana mantakarana pravrittiya. Like that, we can feel that the spirit of Śaṅkara lies. Śaṅkara's acceptance of abheda, bheda or bheda is tentative. What I said is, for upasana, this bheda and the abheda, these things accommodated by Śaṅkara are certainly indicators of his magnanimity. If so, if not, he could not even accommodate that even for per se. For example, even for upasana, you should not have that. He is not a very narrow-minded person who is not a prescriptive person. He is not that. Śaṅkara certainly accommodates. That's why he says at many places all these Devata Tattvas, they are tentative in nature. In Bhagavad Gita, though he says, Bhagavad Gita Bhashya, though he says, these are the Tamasa Devatas, these are the Sattvika Devatas, and these are the Rajas Devatas, these are Devatas. In the Bhagavad Gita also it is said, these are yajante, satvika, daivan, yaksha, rakshamsa, rajasa, bhuta. Yajante, they respect and they all are rescued. But there is a process. And that spirit has been completely accepted by Śaṅkara. And that's why the Śaṅkara parampara too has accepted. Everywhere we see that acceptance. If not, Vidyāranya or Madhusūdana Saraswati or Appai Dikshita, they would not have written great works. Ishova, Keshava, Shrutishnakara Gira, Mastu Tatparya Bhumihin, Asmakam Tatravadaha, Prasartya Nitaram, Spashtam Advaita Bhajam, Kintu Isha Dvesha Gadhanala Kalita Hridam, Durmatinam, Duruktir Bhanktum Yatno Mamayam, Nahi Bhavate Tato, Vishnu Vidvesha Shanka. This is what Appai Dikshita says. This spirit is certainly Śaṅkarite, not alien to Śaṅkara parampara.
You said that it's taken very long, Vividisa Sannyasa and Vidut Sannyasa. So all that is there. What Shruti does is, in case of Yajnavalkya, even if he, whatever he did, okay, even they do not attribute the status of Vidut Sannyasa to Yajnavalkya. He says for his sannyasa is also Vividisa Sannyasa. So when you say that, that Linga and Vidyāranya say that, okay,
women too,
and women, where does he say?
In Jivan Mukti Viveka of Swami Vidyāranya, we have this reference.
There is a great lady saint in Karnataka who was thrown out of her house and she
Akka Mahadevi.
Okay. She will come under that, no?
But her tradition is Shakti Vishishta Advaita. And there, that's what I mean, no formal renunciation. A formal renunciation, like and then uttering Praisha mantras, having Danda and Kamandala, Kashaya, all these things, they become Lanchana. Śaṅkara clearly says that.
Lanchana for Śaṅkara also, if you challenge the.
No. There is nothing wrong with Lanchana.
Okay.
But proclaiming that this is the highest aspect of sannyasa, naniragdir nachakriyaha. Bhagavad Gita clearly says, and then Manusmriti clearly says, na lingam dharma karanam in yati dharma prakarana. So linga, lanchana, these external attires and attributes, they are upadhi. They have to be respected, but it is not the crux of it. That is again from Adhyaropa and Upavada will be knowing. Śaṅkara respects Vidvat Sannyasa very much, but he is not opposed to order also. That's what I wanted to show. Śaṅkara's accommodation is very big, but at the same time, his rootedness in Paramartha, that only makes him accommodate. Ānandavardhana's accommodation is because of his rootedness in rasa. Those who are not rooted in rasa and Brahma, they will not be having true viveka, true discrimination and accommodation in Brahmavada and Rasavada respectively.
When all these Ācaryas have their own understanding about sannyasa and they define it Vividisa or this or that, it is just like the Dharma Shastrakara, you know. So for the same mistake, so Gautama Dharma Shastra says something, Yajnavalkya Dharma Shastra says something, Narada says something. It depends on the compassionateness of the compassion and large-heartedness, accommodative of the Dharma Shastrakara. So in this, in telling that, okay, you are non-Brahmana, you are not a sannyasi, because the Shruti doesn't give you that. Okay, you are a female, you don't have. So categorically no, because everybody has their own points of view, right?
Yes.
All are Acharyas.
That is how Samanvaya has to be arrived at.
Samanvaya, yeah.
If not, Samanvaya will be impossible. I have one more section there. Samanvaya and Avirodha. In the Samanvaya Adhikarana, clearly it is said. And Avirodha is eventually possible because of that. Because of Samanvaya, will be having Avirodha. And we all know the traditional way of looking at Brahma Sutra is Sadhana, Avirodha, Samanvaya, and then we have Phala, like that. The four Adhyayas are divided likewise. What I want to say is, there are two aspects even in Dharma Shastras. One is the Paramarthika, that is the Samanya Dharma, and the other is Vyavaharika, that is based on desha and kala, that is vishesha dharma. Samanya dharma, they transcend all these varnas, they transcend all these ashramas. But samanya dharma is universal. Vishesha dharmas are restricted. That's why ahimsa, satyam asteyam, shaucham indriya nigraha, yetam samasikam dharmam chaturvarne bravin manu. How the Dharmashastrakaras emphasize samanya more than vishesha, so also Śaṅkara emphasizes nirupadhika more than sopadhika, nirguna more than saguna. So also Ānandavardhana emphasizes dhvani, that is the pathway to rasa, more than the gunibhuta vyañja and much more than the chitra and other things. This is how we have adhikari bheda, taratama nishreni, a ladder of superior and inferior is always there, but that is only to get enlightened. It is not to denigrate. See, ladder is provided to climb up, not to fall away.
It's intense, no? So in the excitement of unfolding a paper, lot of formalities we forgot. You happy?
Are you? But have I taken more time?
Thank you, Professor R Ganesh. I request Swamini to offer a bouquet to Professor R Ganesh, the President of the Temple.
Don't worry about time. Because you will not get such a scholar with
Now we are deeply examined
Thank you, sir.
by this parallelism between Śaṅkara and Ānandavardhana. But Ānandavardhana has never taken recourse to the concept of vivarta for justifying his journey.
No.
He has his own means.
Yes.
We are taking some parallels.
Yes.
Śaṅkara and
Yes.
vivarta was never a means in the hand of
Yes.
That is first of all, you must
Uh-huh.
make it very clear. Secondly, when we put together artha and vivarta, because the grammarians have mystified the things and they say that the artha is the vivarta of sabda and all that, you know. I also said, okay, that is at a level, it may be accepted, but when we accept a relation between sabda and artha called vritti, how can we say one thing as vivarta? Then vritti will not be accepted. Vritti will not be there at all.
Please.
When vritti is there between sabda and artha.
Yes.
When sabda itself, artha itself is the vivarta of sabda. Then where is vritti? And vritti's necessity is also not there.
Yes. Vritti is one term coined by the people for convenience to explain. Vrittis, where they occur only at the level of artha, because the shabda is one and the only one. Abhidhā artha, not abhidhā shabda. Lakṣaṇā artha, not lakṣaṇā shabda. Likewise, artha is connected with vritti. Vrittis are meant to elucidate artha, and that's why it is vivarta, shabda vivarta. Various shades of meanings are brought out, and that's why it is vivarta. And Ānandavardhana, though he has not mentioned vivarta, he has complete agreement of vyakarnas, and that's why prathamehi vidvamso vyakarnaha. Likewise, everywhere Dhvani Siddhanta is opposed by people like Mahima Bhatta and people like Bhattanayaka and people like Dhanika, Dhananjaya and others, because they were opposed to schools of grammar. Any school which is in opposition with grammar used to oppose Dhvani Tattva also because of their philosophical bias with their respective schools. Hence, Dhvanyaloka, though it has not used to a greater extent all the techniques of Vyakarana, openly acknowledges that Vyakarnas are there. And even in the other Udyotas, apart from the first Udyota, where he mentions, I quoted, Prathamehi Vidvamso Vyakarana, in the other Udyotas also he refers to Vyakarnas. And
philosophers and grammarians, they accept vritti.
Yes, but vyañjanā-vyāpāra is not accepted. accepting vritti means lakṣaṇā vritti, abhidhā and lakṣaṇā. But the Mīmāmsakas, they go to Tātparya vritti.
No, I am saying the relation between word and meaning as vritti has been accepted by both grammarians and philosophers.
Yes.
So the status of vritti is never on dispute. That is number one.
Yes. But vrittis are of three kinds as per Dhvanikara and the Alankarikas. But only of two kinds as per Naiyayikas. Even Vyakarnas, they have Vyakti, Vyañjanā-vyāpāra is there. But they don't give special importance to Vyañjanā-vyāpāra as the Alankarikas give. Alankarikas got inspired by Vyakarana. But they are not completely following Vyakarana, and Vyakarnas are not dependent on Alankarikas as well.
Certain small concepts which are in jeopardy now. If we take Artha as the vivarta of Sabda, this is a great theory of grammarians. I accept that.
Yes.
And we also welcome that.
Yes.
In any extent, it also helps us in understanding
Yes.
that this is number one, vritti. Second concept is sanketa.
Huh.
Smat sabdat ayam arthaha bodhavya iti ishwarecha sanketa. When God declares
Yes.
this is the sabda and this is its meaning, then both sabda and artha
Inseparable.
He created a convention, that is
Yes.
He created a convention that they are interlinked.
Yes.
Ghata is this ghata.
Yes.
So they are interlinked. That means the ghata was already there when sabda was also there. It cannot be a vivarta of sabda.
This is how you are standing from the perspective of Naiyayika and saying, for that I should say, Nayam Samaya Naiyayikanam.
Just as vritti was in jeopardy, so also the concept of sanketa.
Yes, that's why this is an age-old fight between Naiyayikas and Alankarikas. Naiyayika and Alankarikas have traditional fight since 1200 years.
We can accept it as vivarta, artha as vivarta, only in a transcendental level.
Yes.
It cannot, epistemologically it
Yes.
cannot work. Epistemologically it cannot work.
Out of this scholastic discourse, I accept that. Exactly. I accept. But without having that, we cannot account for our experience. Because whatever the Naiyayikas may say, Alankarikas may say, Mīmāmsakas may say, but in our experience we do have. No, that's why keep aside all the attributes, Advaitin or Vishtadvaitin or whatsoever. Just keeping that, one line. Gandhi's death had a death blow on nation's psyche. Means, nation's psyche, does it have a body? Such questions come. Then, how to understand that this sentence can only be explained by Vyañjana? At the level of abhidhā, it becomes redundant. By the demise of one person, the whole city wept. Means, will the city have a body, and whether it has an pair of eyes or tears, where the tears are shed?
You can bring in anthropomorphism.
No, again you are depending on vivañjanā-vyāpāra. That's what I am saying. Vyañjana cannot be dismissed, for it will be against our experience. That's why all our Shastras have to depend upon experience. This is what Śaṅkara says. And experience of whom? Experience of Sahridaya, that is Ānandavardhana says. Experience of Jivan Mukta, that is what Śaṅkara says.
And again, Shakti cannot be a vivarta of Shiva. Vagartha Samprukto Vagartha Pratipatte. They are both Shiva and Parvati are there. Parvati is not the vivarta of Shiva, rather later she got mingled to his body, left part of the body. That is our Puranic thing, mystical thing. But in this way, we can also understand the concept of vivarta is accepted after the independence between word and meaning are accepted. What Kashmiri Saivism says, Artha Sammu Śivāvānī. They are independent and very powerful. Nobody can say that Vāni is a part of Sabda or Sabda is a part of Vāni. They are together in a certain stage. There we may take it, we may mystify it to bring the concept of vivarta.
Now you are bringing in Agama, one Shaiva Agama. I shall bring Shakta Agama. Shivashaktya yukto idhi bhavati shakta prabhavitum nachedevam devo nakalu kushala spanditum api. Parvati is dominating Shiva in Shaka.